Welcome back to the Languages Pedagogy Podcast. Well, in today's episode, I want to take a moment to breathe, reflect, and unpack one of the most powerful conversations we've had recently on the show. This is episodes 197 and 198 with Judy Thompson. This one is the fear factor in language learning. Why knowledge doesn't turn into speech. We're going to start doing this type of reflection on the previous episodes so you can get a little bit more like the takeaways from those episodes. So, and honestly, this conversation was not just about English. It was not just about speaking or about grammar, pronunciation, or classroom participation. It was about something much deeper. It was about fear. The invisible fear that sits inside students before they open their mouths. The fear that makes intelligent adults sound unsure. The fear that makes children freeze, teachers control instead of guide. That fear that makes school protect systems instead of serving learners. So this is how we start. So as I usually say, sit down comfortably, get yourself a coffee, and let's get started. Judy said something that stayed with me. Fear kills participation. And the more I think about it, the more I believe this is one of the most important truths in language education. Because many students are not silent because they are lazy or because they do not care or just because they have nothing to say. Many of them are silent because speaking feels dangerous. Not physically dangerous, of course, but emotionally dangerous. They're afraid of sounding foolish. They're afraid of making mistakes or afraid of their accent being judged. They're afraid that one wrong sentence will make people question their intelligence. And here's the tragedy. Many of those fears are not real problems. They are learned barriers. One of the strongest ideas Judy brought into the conversation was that many learners do not need more grammar before they speak. They need permission, safety, different relationship with language. They need to understand that speaking is not the final exam of language learning. Speaking is the practice field. And for many, many years, many classrooms have treated language as if the goal were correctness first and communication later. But that creates a dangerous gap. Students may know the rules, they may recognize the structure, they may pass the written exercises, even score well on grammar tests. But when the moment comes to speak, nothing comes out. And why? Simple, right? Because knowledge does not automatically become speech. Grammar does not become confidence, and accuracy does not automatically become fluency. Speech requires emotional safety. And that was one of the biggest lessons from Judy's perspective. If the learner is afraid, the brain does not perform freely. If the learner feels watched, judged, corrected, or embarrassed, participation collapses. And when participation collapses, teachers often misread the situation. We say, they're not motivated. We say, just they're not trying, or they're weak students. But maybe the truth is more uncomfortable. Maybe we failed to create the conditions where trying felt safe. Judy also challenged the traditional role of the teacher. She made a strong distinction between teaching and coaching. Traditional teaching is often accountable to curriculum, administration, pacing guides, textbooks, and exams. Coaching, on the other hand, is accountable to the learner's real outcome. That is a powerful shift. A teacher may ask, "Did I finish the unit?" But coach asks, "Can this person now do what they came here to do?" That difference matters. And if a professional needs English for a meeting next week, they do not need a beautiful explanation of the present perfect. They need to survive the meeting. They need to introduce ideas, disagree politely, clarify points, respond under pressure, and not collapse emotionally when someone asks questions. That is not just grammar. That's performance. That is confidence, strategy. That's what she called coaching. Another key point that actually stayed here in my mind was the idea of unlearning. Yes, unlearning. Judy repeated this idea with force. Unlearn, unlearn, unlearn. And I agree. Many learners are not starting from zero. They're starting from a damaged relationship with language. They learn actually that mistakes are shameful. And they have also learned that accents are embarrassing. Grammar is more important than meaning. And that silence is even safer than risk. So before we teach them something new, sometimes we must help them unlearn what blocked them in the first place. That also applies to teachers. Many of us inherited systems that train us to control, correct, explain, evaluate. We were not always trained to observe fear or build safety or maybe just facilitate thinking. Or right now, it's really something now on social media. Protect student dignity. And that is why Judy's comments about mistakes were so important. She said she does not see them as mistakes. She sees them as markers. A so-called mistakes shows us where the learner's thinking is. It gives us information. It tells us how the learner made meaning. That is beautiful pedagogical shift. Now, instead of saying wrong, we can ask, how did you get there? Instead of humiliating, because this is the word, humiliating the learners. Because sometimes teachers, we don't even notice that we're actually doing this. We can investigate the thinking. Sometimes what looks wrong is actually intelligent. Sometimes the learner made a connection based on what they already know. Sometimes they are not failing. They're just building. And this is specifically important with children. When a child gives an unexpected answer, our job is not to crush the answer. Our job is to understand the path. Remember that children are not machines. They are not actually designed to reproduce the answer in the teacher's head. A child is a developing human being learning how to think, connect, test, and express. If we punish that process, we do not create better learners. We create quieter learners. And one of the most powerful parts of the conversation was Judy's critique of fear-based education. Traditional education often operates on control. Sit down, be quiet, memorize, repeat, obey, pass the test, move on. But Language learning cannot thrive inside that model. Language requires voice, risk, identity, interaction. You cannot bully someone into authentic communication. You can force repetition, but you cannot force ownership. And that word matters. Ownership. A student has not truly learned language until they can use it as their own, not as a script, not as a memorized answer or textbook sentence. Their thought, their emotions, intentions, voices. That is why active learning became such an important theme in the conversation. Judy talked about learning by doing, project-based learning, social emotional intelligence, metacognition, and the role of AI as a tool. The point was not to chase trends. The point was to move education away from passive reception and toward human participation, connection. Students need to do things with language. They need to build, negotiate, question, create, fail safely, try again, reflect. And yes, we also talk about AI. Judy's position was clear. AI is a tool. The problem is not AI. The problem is whether teachers know how to use it smartly. Students are already living in a world where asking technology for help is normal. So education cannot pretend that that world does not exist. The real question is not, should AI enter the classroom? It already has. The real question is, can we use AI to support thinking instead of replacing it? That is where metacognition becomes essential. Students need to think about their thinking. Teachers need to think about their teaching. And parents need to think about their fear. School need to think about their systems. Without metacognition, we keep reacting. With metacognition, we start noticing. Judy gave a beautiful example connecting to parents. When a child does not answer quickly, some parents immediately panic. Why don't you know? Why didn't you answer? Why are you slow? But often that reaction is not about the child. It is about the adult's fear. Fear that the child is fallen behind, or that the child will be judged. Fear that the parent will be embarrassed, or that the future is at risk. But when adults fail to identify their own fear, they transfer it to children. That is one of the deepest lessons of this recap. Fear is contagious, but safety is contagious too. A calm teacher creates a different room. A confident coach creates a different learner. A patient parent creates a different child. The emotional climate around learning matters more than many people want to admit. Judy also introduced the idea of psychological safety. Before students can learn, contribute, challenge, or grow, they must first feel that they belong. That is the foundation. If a learner is asking internally, am I safe here? Or am I welcome here? Will I be humiliated here? Then learning becomes secondary. The nervous system is busy protecting the person. And this is where education must evolve. A truly modern classroom is not just a place where information is delivered. It's a place where learners become braver, capable, autonomous. The teacher is no longer the person who simply gives answers. The teacher becomes the person who designs conditions for growth. That is not a smaller role. It is a more serious role. Because information is everywhere now. Students can find explanations online. They can ask AI or watch videos, translate words, or generate examples. So, if a teacher's only value is information delivery, that role is in trouble. But if a teacher knows how to build confidence, diagnose barriers, create safety, personalize learning, guide reflection, and turn knowledge into action, that teacher is more important than ever. This is why Judy's conversation was so direct, so uncomfortable, and so necessary. She was not defending the old system. She was asking, what do we do now? And that is the question every educator should be asking. What do we do now when students know grammar but cannot speak? Or what do we do now when participation is blocked by fear? What do we do now when correction creates silence? What do we do now when children are treated like they must read the teacher's mind? And what do we do now when teachers themselves are afraid? For me, the answer begins with a shift in responsibility. We stop blaming students first. We stop assuming silence means laziness. We stop treating mistakes as moral failure. We stop confusing control with teaching. We stop worshiping curriculum completion while ignoring learners' transformation. And we start asking better questions. What does this learner actually need? What fear is blocking their speech? What can they already do? What part of the first language can help them? What small success can build confidence today? What kind of correction protects dignity? What kind of task makes language useful? What kind of classroom makes students brave? That is the future of language education. Not louder teachers, not longer grammar explanation, no more shame, no more pressure, not more empty performance. The future belongs to teachers who can create safety, build autonomy, coach real outcomes, and help learners turn knowledge into voice. And maybe that is the heart of episode 205. Knowledge does not become speech by accident. It becomes speech when fear is reduced, when practice is meaningful, when mistakes are respected as markers, when learners feel safe enough to risk, and when teachers understand that language is not just a subject. Language is identity, it's courage, participation, belonging. So to every teacher listening, here is the challenge. Do not only ask whether your students know the answer. Ask whether they feel safe enough to try. Because sometimes the problem is not that they do not know. Sometimes the problem is that they are afraid to show you what they know. And until we understand that, we will keep teaching grammar to students who need courage. Until next time, keep teaching with courage, keep listening with humility, and keep creating classrooms where knowledge finally becomes voice.